want to talk about moving towards an outcome. How is it that you actually start pulling together all the data to come up with an outcome? Now, as our assessment interview team is aware, teams are aware, we've got 4 outcomes. The first is recommended, and so that's a green light. You're ready to plant. You've got the gifts and the skills and the competencies to plant a church. There's a yellow light with recommended with conditions. There's a few areas that you need to work on. The third assessment outcome is strong potential with conditions, which is a stop. We actually want you to work on some significant areas over the next 1 to 2 years, and then we believe you'll be ready to plan, obviously subject to coming back to an assessment interview process. And then finally, not recommended, which is not that you're not suited for ministry, but it's that you're not suited for church planning. Steve, it'd be really helpful to help the assessment interview teams think into how do you pull together all the pieces, all the inputs. We've got character references, we've got their own personal observations about themselves and responses. We've got the psychometric testing that we're doing with the Lifeway assessment tool, and then you've got the 2-hour behavioural assessment interview as well. How do you start pulling that together to get to that objective outcome?
Yeah. So a couple of points. First of all, just again, stepping back, I like to step back and look at context. That's the way my brain works. It's really important that people understand the principle you just described there that was embedded in your statements. You do not rely on one source of data, right? The best behavioral interview in the world, no matter how good the assessor is, isn't enough in and of itself. So the fact that you are pulling sources of information or data from other sources is really, really an important principle that people need to get. Don't short-circuit that. Don't take the easy road.
Yeah.
It brings to mind the old parable about the blind men describing an elephant. We've all heard that before. You don't want to fall into that trap. Right? You need to get as many perspectives as you possibly can about that individual, both from the person themselves, which obviously the behavioral interview is a key part of that, but also other people that have worked with them. So if we think back to a principle we talked about in an earlier interview, we're really trying to get as close as possible to observing this person in real time. Now, we know that you can't physically do that, but if you can talk to people who have, that's a really powerful thing. So those character references you referred to, getting people who've actually worked with this individual, who have done life with this person, to describe in a behavioral way, again, the same model that we use in the behavioral interview, to describe what it was like, how they behaved, how they performed, how they dealt with challenges that came along the way, and to give you factual detail in those responses. Pulling that together, and then it's a matter of cross-referencing. So it's like a good detective, right? You're gathering evidence, you're gathering information, you're gathering data, and then you start cross-referencing to see whether or not everything lines up or whether there are inconsistencies there.
Now, the use of references, character reference in the assessment documents is often quite helpful because you start to see some of the key threads, I think, as Al Stewart calls it, that you can actually pull on. The 2 or 3 behaviours that are either going to be blockages to them planning a church or are going to be the key sort of success factors for them planning a church. How would you approach post interview, calling out one of the character references and following up key bits of information? What's the best way to approach a reference check or a character reference check? Yeah.
So what I would want to do is, if I've already got an idea about some issues, as you said, either the success factors I want to confirm or possibly a few question marks about the individual, then I would be very specific with the character reference or the person I'm speaking to or getting written information from. Say, I'd really like you to focus on these areas to give you the greatest chance of discovering whether or not your assumptions are correct. And then, again, cross-checking that back to what your observations were in the actual interview. So, yeah, being targeted with that, being very selective in terms of what is this information that you really want to clarify before you make your final conclusion.
Right, and sometimes it's a 50-50. We're on the edge of being a green light or a yellow light, or on the edge of being a stop and a yellow light. What are some helpful ways to get clarity and confirmation, either way?
Well, obviously you leverage as many of these different sources of information as you can. There's sometimes a case, though, where even after looking at as much data as you can, you've looked under all the rocks, you've talked to as many people as you can, you still have a doubt. My philosophy has always been, if in doubt, cut it out. Sometimes you just have to make a call, and unless you're really confident, because as we know, this is high stakes. We're talking about people's lives here and so on, in terms of their investment of time and effort. So my view is if you get to that point and the light's still yellow and it's not a green, then I think that the right call, the tough call, but the right call is to say no go.
Yeah.
Now maybe it's not for now, and I understand from involvement with your organization that sometimes is a conclusion. It's like maybe not for now. Let's have another chat in 12 months' time, and I think that's a wonderful option to have up your sleeve.
Yep.
Most organizations wouldn't do that. They would just wave goodbye and that'd be the end of it. But it's probably in some cases better for not only the organization but for the individual to say not for now. So yeah, my view is you need to be really sure, and you want to make sure that after that cross-referencing, you've kind of lined it all up, that everything is pointing in the same direction, or at least 90% of it's pointing in the same direction, to give you that confidence that you need to make the right call.
Great. Well, that's been really helpful, Steve, to have your insights into behavioural assessment. God willing, the outcome will be that we have the opportunity to assess church planting couples better and see, God willing, hundreds of new churches evangelised into existence across Australia. Thanks for spending time with us today.
My pleasure.